In October 1962, a 13-day window opened where the possibility of a global nuclear exchange moved from a theoretical warning to a likely outcome. The United States and the Soviet Union found themselves in a direct standoff over the military status of an island located 90 miles from the American coast. This period remains the primary case study for how the momentum of a geopolitical crisis can override the intentions of the leaders involved, bringing civilization to the edge of a conflict neither side initially sought. This sequence of events began with a shift in regional alliances. Following the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, Fidel Castro sought Soviet protection, leading to a rapid military integration between Cuba and the USSR. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev saw an opportunity to offset the American nuclear advantage in Europe. He secretly deployed medium and intermediate-range missiles to Cuba, placing major American population centers within a straying range of only a few minutes. The secret held until October 14th, when a U.S. U-2 spy plane conducted a high-altitude reconnaissance sweep over the Cuban interior. 2 days later, President Kennedy was presented with these images. They provided undeniable evidence of active missile sites under construction in the Cuban jungle. The presence of launch control centers and support cabling indicated that these weapons were days away from being operational. For the White House, the time available for a diplomatic response was now being dictated by the speed of Soviet construction crews. Kennedy immediately formed the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, or EXCOM. This group of advisors was tasked with solving a crisis that, for the moment, was still a state secret. They weighed 4 specific paths: maintaining the status quo, pursuing a diplomatic settlement, launching a full-scale invasion of Cuba, or establishing a naval blockade. On October 22nd, Kennedy chose a middle path. He announced a naval quarantine to stop further Soviet shipments, while demanding the immediate removal of the missiles already on the ground. By taking this demand to a televised national audience, Kennedy moved the crisis from a private negotiation to a public confrontation, committing both superpowers to their positions in full view of the world. The military response was immediate. U.S. forces moved to DEFCON 2, the highest readiness level in the nation's history. To ensure the American retaliatory capability could not be destroyed on the ground, nuclear-armed bombers were kept in the air 24 hours a day. As the hours passed, Soviet cargo ships continued their course toward the American blockade line. The blockade created a mechanical trigger for war. A single engagement between a U.S. destroyer and a Soviet transport would have initiated a set of military protocols that the political leaders might not have been able to stop. On October 27, Black Saturday, the ability of either leader to manage the escalation appeared to vanish. A U.S. U-2 plane was shot down over Cuba, killing the pilot. In Washington, advisors argued that the only logical response was an immediate retaliatory strike on the Soviet missile batteries. At the same time, the U.S. Navy began dropping signaling depth charges on a Soviet submarine near the quarantine line, unaware of what the vessel was actually carrying. This B-59 class submarine was out of contact with Moscow and was armed with a nuclear-tipped torpedo. Believing that a full-scale war had already begun, the captain ordered the nuclear torpedo to be fired. Under Soviet rules, the launch required the agreement of 3 officers. While 2 agreed, a third officer, Vasily Arkhipov, refused, preventing the launch. At the most dangerous moment of the standoff, the survival of the global population was decided not by the presidents in their offices, but by the restraint of a single officer in a pressurized hull. Realizing how close they had come to a conflict they couldn't control, Kennedy and Khrushchev entered a frantic exchange of back-channel communications to find an exit. The public agreement was reached on October 28th. The Soviets would dismantle their Cuban sites in exchange for a public American pledge not to invade the island. However, the deal was only finalized through a secret concession. The U.S. agreed to dismantle its own Jupiter nuclear missiles stationed in Turkey, a move that was hidden from the public to protect Kennedy's political standing. Keeping the Turkey trade a secret was a tactical necessity. Had the public known the U.S. was trading the security of an ally for its own, the resulting political fallout would have compromised Kennedy's ability to lead the NATO alliance. The narrowness of the escape forced a change in how the superpowers communicated. They established a direct hotline between Moscow and Washington to ensure that future crises would not be left to the slow pace of traditional diplomacy. This shift also led to the first major steps towards disarmament, including the signing of the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. The Cuban Missile Crisis serves as a permanent reminder that in a world of automated military doctrine, peace is not maintained by the weapons themselves, but by the persistent application of communication and restraint.